Hello, everyone. I'm Saurabh back again with another episode of Freshly Pressed. Today we have Anna with us.
Hi.
They're a comic writer and an artist from the Netherlands.
hmm
I would love for you to introduce yourself, Anna.
Yeah, okay, so I'm Anna. I'm 26 years old and I'm a comic writer. I also write tabletop roleplay stuff. And in my free time, I like to paint mountains and sunsets and make collages. So yeah, I like to be creative in that sense.
That's awesome. Um, I know, like, what I want to know a brief history about yourself, how you got into comics, and what attracted you to the medium. And I know, like, for me personally, I love the medium because I love visual stuff and
hmm
how it like just being, it's so creative that you can just show something and tell a story that way.
hmm
um yeah, it just paints, instead of painting a picture in somebody's imagination, you actually literally present them what you think about it. So
hmm
yeah, I would love to know what inspired you to and attracted you to comics.
Well, I've always just done a lot of writing, or even when I was younger, just making up stories with my toys, where I had whole like scenarios, played that whole world building things. And as so English is not my native language. So when I was about 14, I joined Twitter and I started role playing there, and I started learning English. I started learning how to write, and kind of that gradually grew into like an interest of wanting a career in writing somewhere. And I've always tried to write like novels and short stories, and short stories were fine, but novels I couldn't really get my teeth into, couldn't really figure out how I could do that. And then one day, and this is going to sound really silly, but one day I was reading a comic because I like reading comics, and I suddenly it hit me like someone writes these. So so sitting, I never really thought about because obviously you see the name on the cover and stuff like that, but never really like took a moment to think about like someone writes these. And I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yep,
And I
yep.
think that was a few years ago where I was like, oh, maybe I could do that because that sounded because like I said, I like writing, but I hadn't really found a medium yet that like worked for me. And once I like it's so silly, but once I just realized like, oh, people actually write these, and I was like, oh, maybe I can look into how to write a comic. And yeah, it's not the greatest origin story, honestly.
No,
Yeah.
no, no, absolutely. No, it's absolutely not silly at all because
Yeah.
like when you read comics, you actually don't realize it's so visual and there's so much focus on
Yeah, yeah.
art and stuff, like in
hmm
colors and backgrounds and whatnot that actually you don't realize somebody actually wrote the story, somebody did
Yeah.
editing and all those sorts
Yeah,
of things,
exactly. You don't really realize what's going into it other than like the art that you see. But yeah, no, so then I reached out to someone Zaychun, which is a writer from TKO Studios, because I sometimes I've been back and forth with him like really briefly about things, and I was like, "Oh, you write comics, can you maybe help me get like how do I start?" And he was very kind, and he sent me a script of his that I could use sort of to see what that would look like, not to copy obviously, but just look like what a comic strip looked like. And from there I started practicing. I have a like a story that I wrote I never published, probably not gonna because it was just for trialing. And then later on I had a short comic that I wrote that I sent to the 77 publications, and they liked it and they wanted it for their comic. And that's kind of how I got my first publication, and that was in I sent that in 2020, and it was published I think a few months after that, if I recall. So yeah, so I started writing comics in 2019, and a year later I had my first short story publication,
Wow,
which was really exciting. So yeah.
that's amazing. That's amazing.
hmm
I saw on your profile that there's an upcoming comic book from Mad Cave Studios.
hmm
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. So last year I won their talent search. I tried joining it in 2020, didn't get in, and then 2021 was my apparently my lucky year. So I remember I was at home. It was my dad's birthday actually, and I was sitting there with my family and their friends. And I was just like, I was at the point I was really tired and was ready to go home because but they don't live in my city. I live like they're somewhere else. I was ready to go home and like drive home. And I was looking at my phone and I suddenly saw my Twitter notifications had blown up. I'm like, what's going on? So I scrolled back to like where it started. I was like, I literally said like, holy shit, like in a room full of people. They were just looking at me like, what's going on? So I had to explain to them what happened. And obviously they were very happy for me, but I remember that moment very well. I was really like overwhelmed and it was really cool. And then yeah, I got to work on a comic for Nottingham. Um, which is coming out in February, the first issue. So all of the writers and artists got like teamed up, and then everyone got to write a single issue for that anthology. So yeah, that's really exciting because I delivered the script like December last year, so about a year ago. So it also goes to show how long it takes for a comic to reach publication. So I've just been,
Absolutely.
and I'm not a patient person at all, so it's very difficult to keep my mouth shut at times. So I was very glad that once they announced like the title that I got to work
Yeah,
on, because I couldn't say that at first. I couldn't say anything about what I worked on. I was like,
right.
okay, so at least I can talk about that now. But yeah, no, it's very exciting, and I'm very curious to see what people are going to say about it. I think my issue is issue number 2 in the row because there's going to be,
Awesome.
I think, 5 or 6 issues, I think. But yeah, so yeah, that was really cool.
That's awesome. Can you let us know what it's called if you're right with that?
So it's actually, if I'm gonna try and say it right because I said it wrong the other day. I think it's Tales from Nottingham. I said Tales of Nottingham a while ago,
Oh,
so that wasn't right.
okay.
But no, it's Tales from Nottingham. So it's basically everyone has the way it worked. We got given a different prompt that we had to work with. It was just like a prompt of like 2 lines, and that was it. And the rest was just completely up to us. I
Right.
don't know what the other people wrote. I don't, because we intentionally kept it a secret so we could surprise each other, which was pretty nice. So I
That's
don't know what
amazing.
they wrote. I don't know what the first issue is by David and Shane, because they originally do the Nottingham one. They did like a one-off as well. So I don't know what they have written. So I only know what I've written, honestly. So, but it's gonna be basically if you read Nottingham, these are kind of like separate sort of short stories about like in that universe. Um, so it's very interesting to kind of like see what people came up with and how they imagined these things to be. I think the only thing I can say about mine is that was inspired by a European folktale that is been around for a while, and that's all I can say. So yeah, no, it's very I'm very interested to see what the other people came up with as well.
Absolutely. No, I'm sure people are looking forward to it. I am. I love reading new things and I love reading that's why I love indie comics as well. Like there's so many different perspectives and for the same thing. Like for example, you said like Tales from Nottingham. There's
Mhm.
like so many different points of view, so many different ways many stories can be approached. And like it's just a tale about like a town, but from perspective of so many different people. That's
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's like obviously it's like the Robin Hood lore, and I really love what David has done with like the because obviously you've got like the Robin Hood tale, and then Nottingham kind of has a different spin on that, and I really like that. It was also very interesting to be given a character that isn't mine because I'm used to writing characters that I created, and now I was given a character that already existed and had like a personality, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
kind of like there's like kind of like almost that sort of pressure, like I have to like deliver it as well, and I have to write it in a way that it's in canon, and that was a very good experience for me to write someone
yeah,
else's character. But yeah, no, they were all very excited about when I delivered my script. They were all very happy with it. So
yeah.
I think I did the right thing.
That's awesome. That's great to know. And I got what you're saying about a character, right? Like I was part of an anthology a while back where we
Mhm.
we were working with characters from public domain. So all these characters did have like a history and a
Mhm.
portrayal in pop culture already. But and we had to do monster mashups. So which was very interesting. But like the great part about writing those characters, like rewriting, I guess some of them was that like you could actually put your own spin on them
Mhm.
and then yeah do something new with an existing character. So yeah, I think that part was really fun for me. So like some part of it is what people already relate to and some part of it is what you actually come up with.
Yeah, yeah, no, I like that too. Yeah, so one point you want to make sure it's accurate still, like it's not too out of character, but the other hand, like trying to figure out how you can put your own little like the little touch to it, and that
Yeah.
was really interesting to work with, honestly, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds amazing. Sounds amazing. I like, and thank you for sending me your work, your like the
Hmm.
4 shorts you sent. They were really, really good. And
Thank you.
yeah, I think there's a running theme through all of them.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Yes, I think some of them. I can list a few, the ones that I found. Maybe you can fill in the rest.
Hmm.
Some of them are about existentialism, surrealism as well is large part of some of those stories.
Hmm.
I would say death and is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Even I feel like almost all of them have some sort of an angel or a character who leads the lead character kind of person, right?
Hmm.
Like um yeah, some sort of mythical character that lead character interacts with. So yeah,
Hmm.
like I think there are some running themes in there. I would love for you to get into some of them. Like uh, yeah,
Yeah, no, I honestly, most of my of what I've written so far just doesn't have happy endings, and it's just like, it's just like, and or like not even like, it's always just like I really enjoy working with like twist endings or like unhappy endings, but not unsatisfying endings, just like unhappy endings, and I also really like questioning like how things work in the world, and like you said, like essentialism as well. Really, I really like diving into like questioning what makes us as a person, but also, how do we view the world? How do we interact with the world, and stuff like that. And I just really like to write, I guess, a bit of weird stuff, but I also really like you said, mythological creatures or like monsters. I really enjoy that. But
yeah,
I think so far, if I look at what I've written so far, like published and unpublished, I think none of them end on a happy note, and and I don't really know why that came about, but I think like it's just interesting to. I think I recently actually read a comic. Uh, 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 it's called I See a Night. I don't remember the name of the creator, but it was from Shortbox Comics, and I read that, and I read the ending, and that's kind of like, without spoiling anything, it's kind of like these sort of endings I like. I really like reading stories that surprise you at the end, that oh, I didn't think it was going that way, or I didn't think this was gonna happen. And it's honestly not been intentional. It's usually I start writing, and then always at the end, it's just it's just
yeah,
unhappy or something like that. But I don't know. I really like kind of looking into, I guess, the sort of the darker things, or the or the things that are above us, like you said, like mythological things, or like some kind of creatures. Um Maybe also because that's kind of what I'm interested as well. Like I'm interested in like Norse mythology, or
mm,
in just in general. Like I really like, sometimes I'll have like conversations with friends about like the meaning of life and stuff like that, and like how insignificant we are in the great scheme of all of this. And it's just,
yeah.
I think like it's just kind of like that sort of bleeds into the stories that I write, where it's like, I don't know, it's just something that I don't really always do it on purpose, but always in the end it just ends up being in there.
That's fair enough. Like it's the kind of stories you love to write. Like and that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, and they work really well. I think. I mean, endings don't need to be happy endings all the time.
Mm.
It will be a very strange world if there's happy endings all the time.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
and also I remember like when I was younger, I would read books and I hated if they had an open ending for some reason. And now it's just, I'm guilty of that myself, and reading like writing open endings, or like unhappy endings. And I feel like it's also because I find it interesting to leave the reader with a sense of like imagination, where they can imagine what happens next, which is what you do with an open ending. So like
yeah,
if I were to write a happy ending, it's like that's the end, that's closed. And obviously people can obviously imagine more of it if they want to. But if I leave it like on a sort of unhappy note, or a sort of twist, or not like quite solved it without
mm,
it being unsatisfying, I feel like then for readers it's more interesting to figure out like what will happen next, or if that makes sense, without it being some sort of cliffhanger. Because so far most of my stories has just been one shot. But
yeah.
yeah, no, I like to sort of like leave sort of the reader with a sort of note at the end, sort of like that.
No, I think that's right. Like I think a couple of your endings were not really. One of them was the cliffhanger. I think Tea of Truth was a bit of a cliffhanger,
Mm,
but Forgotten Reality in similar vein was not really a cliffhanger in my opinion. Like I think
no, no, no.
yeah, it went in a very different direction. Obviously, like it had like this alternate reality thing,
Mm.
but yeah, I like it was a pretty like good conclusion to the story. Like it worked pretty well.
Yeah, but it's also like it's sort of like that one specifically. That was the first one I wrote, this first short. That one was like kind of like a loop almost, and that's also where it's just like where like at the end you go like, oh no, like where you like realize like what's going on. It's like, I feel that's so it is sort of not really an open ending, but at the same time you kind of like can't help wonder like how long is this gonna go on for?
No, I absolutely love the transformation from monochrome or black and white to color.
That
It's
was not
just
my choice. That was the artist's choice, and I loved it so much.
absolutely just gives a very new dimension to the story altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No, absolutely loved it. I think one of my favorite mangas is like they don't have a happy ending in that like if you know all you need is skill that
No, I don't think so.
on which this movie Edge of Tomorrow was based on the Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt movie.
Mm.
They like the obviously the movie has a happy ending,
Mm, yeah,
but
yeah. That's usually
but
what they
it's
do.
Hollywood.
Yeah, yeah,
But manga doesn't have it, and it works so well in the book. I'm pretty sure. I think you must read it. It's really good.
I will look out for it because I haven't read a manga in a few years, but I honestly I have a very long to read list, but I will go put it on the list.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah. Cool. What awesome. I would really like to know what else like what inspires you the most as a writer? Like, do you like, is it your travels or like the places that you live, the environments where you, uh, like where you live? Like, do you observe the world and you come up with things for your stories and stuff? Like what
I think
inspires you?
I think it's mostly so I usually when I watch like a TV series or a film or if I read a comic or a book and there's like elements in there that I think like, oh, this is interesting or this is very clever. And I usually sort of take note of that, not to copy, but just to kind of make me think about it later. And I think I'm generally really inspired by the work of others. So for example, I remember when and this is very timely as well, because I remember when I first saw the first Avatar movie, and obviously the second one is now coming out. And I just remember watching it and being like, holy shit. I was just like, that's like the sort of where it's just so like there's a whole new world and it's like amazing and very pretty. And there's so much world building in it. And I also got that with I mean the other Avatar, like the Legend of Aang, for example, that one as well, where you've got like are really inspired by like different worlds in fiction. Um or what wasn't recently I don't remember, but like there's just I really inspired by like thinking about how the world works. So like comparing what we do here in this on this planet to like what people do in fiction, or for example, when people say like when they talk like about alien life and they're like, oh, what if they don't speak our language? Like who says they even speak at all? Look, that's
Yeah,
kind of like
yeah, yeah.
I really like thinking about like those kind of things. And what inspires me is just kind of yeah just the work of others and how we interact with our world. But also sometimes I'll like hear like I'll watch a documentary on something and I'll hear people's life stories and I'm like, oh, that's like an interesting thing. Like for example, the other day I watched a documentary about this family with two parents and two young daughters who the parents are scientists grew up on that boat and they the children they grew up on that boat and they basically their whole life the oldest one was 12, the other one was 9. And it's just like it was just kind of like this insight, like wow, there's such an interesting life to live and such a different way of things. So I'm really inspired by like the sort of like the unique things in life, the unique sort of lives people live, but also like like the work of others. So really just the out of the ordinary things. That's kind of what I like to to look into.
No, I think that's amazing. And like I don't think there's anything wrong. Well, copying is the wrong word, but
Yeah, yeah,
incorporating
yeah.
some sort of pop culture references in your work, like
I
there's
mean,
always space for that.
yeah, that's what it is as well. Because like when I started out with comics, I was really like trying to be like to sort of shy away from getting influenced for other things, and then I was like working together with other creatives like who had been way more experienced than me, and they'd like put up this document of like, oh, it's inspired by this and this and this, and I'm like, oh, so apparently we are allowed to like get inspired by things because I was worried about like unintentionally copying things, and I saw creators around me all just like pulling up references for art, but also like for story things about like pop culture. Like, okay, so that's apparently that's okay to do as long as you obviously don't copy it.
Yep.
But it's more just usually like sometimes I if I see something that really caught my attention. For example, when I watched the Sandman and the scene where Lucifer and Dream sort of fight. That was so clever. And
Yep.
honestly, I was like, that was such a cool way of doing it. And it's not that I'm not gonna copy that, but that does inspire me to think about how can I, if I ever write a fight scene or ever write something like that, a battle, how can I make it more than just like a sword fight or just like a gunfight or whatever like that? How can I make it obviously if it fits for the story, but that just kind of make me think about, oh, that's also a way to do it. That's also, a way to look at a fight. And those are the things I do where I just take note of things and just be like, okay, so if I'm gonna create for example, a fight scene, what can I do to make it stand out from like other sort of fights you've seen before without copying
Mm,
obviously the thing that inspired me, if that
mm.
makes sense.
No, no, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I think in like some of the people I've had chat with in previous interviews, like I could see clear references to like Quentin Tarantino's work or like maybe for example like if one of the characters was called Cutie and he was actually closing a trunk. So that's
uh,
pretty direct reference to is like Quentin Tarantino, like and like there's a lot of other like other stuff that I like to just observe and find, and that's I think those things make stories richer because
mhm.
people love to spot like, oh yeah, this is something I'm familiar with, and they just love that
Yeah.
they can find a piece of themselves in that story as well. So yeah, it just helps to ground the story a little bit more.
Yeah, and also obviously it's very difficult to come up with something completely original because like even things that haven't been published yet, someone out there might have the exact same idea as me. For example, I was writing a comic and I was at the same like in my free time I was reading a book and I was getting to a part of the book was like, this is what I've done in my comic. I'm like, this is like apparently I don't have any original ideas. It was just I was like, oh okay, so I have to probably make sure that it's a little bit different than that. But it was very interesting to see like this book that I hadn't read before coming to that sort of that scene and being like, oh, I've done this and or I'm working on this right now. So it's very like I think people said it before, like there are almost no original ideas, like truly original ideas left. You can only
Yeah,
sort of build on what already exists and then make it your own, and that's what I'm
yeah.
trying to do. And I do try and challenge myself to I really do want to make something really original, but I every
Yeah.
time I try I find it somewhere else. I'm like, oh shit, someone else has already done it. And this is that's my life mission at this point, just create something that someone else hasn't done before, but it's very
Oh
difficult
yeah.
so far.
No, no, I totally understand that. Especially as like I think as indie writers, we always like we push ourselves to be like, yeah, I need to do something better than this, something more original. But then
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, it's been done before so many times.
Yeah, and also just like looking back at old work as well, like you said, like trying to push things to be better. And sometimes I look at old work as well, and like, this is so like I'm like, oh, this is cliche or this is not good. And then other people, it's like for example, I read like Forgotten Reality. People seem to love that one, but whenever I look back at it, I will see the flaws. But that's obviously because that was my first comic, and it's just like it's always like I try to be better, and then I try to now avoid reading back old work just so I don't hate
Mm,
myself. It's just, I mean, it's honestly I've got a lot of imposter syndrome, but I do hear from a lot of other people also who have been like in the industry for like ages that they get the same problem. So I do try and just be nice to myself. But yeah,
you
it's
have to
difficult
be.
sometimes. Yeah,
No,
you have to
no.
be, otherwise, yeah.
believing in yourself is the most important thing that you can do, because like half of the world doesn't. So
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, and
yeah.
also was someone was saying, I forgot who said it, but I was talking about this on Twitter, and someone replied like, if you worry about your work not being good, it just means you care about your work. And the moment you stop worrying about that, it's the moment you stop caring. And that honestly was a very good thing to be reminded of. Like, yeah, I may like beat myself up over these little things, but it does mean that I care about my work and I want it to improve. So that's a good thing to keep in mind, I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, that's very true. And I think, like, even talking about these, there's have you seen Daredevil, the Netflix series, the Daredevil one?
I've only seen so the thing is I only saw the first two seasons because I was watching it in like the order of like the whole Defenders series. And
Right.
then I stranded at Luke Cage at some point because I was watching something else and I sort of forgot about that. And I haven't and then it's been so long that I forgot what happened in the other season. So I am planning to rewatch the whole thing. But like
Yeah.
I got stuck at some point.
Yeah. So in that there's one of the scenes where Daredevil rescues someone, and it's a hallway fight scene, and it's one of the most famous scenes from the entire series.
Yeah, I think I might remember it, yeah.
Yeah. So that whole scene was actually inspired by Old Boy. I was listening to this commentary track,
Oh.
yeah, from one of the writers on Daredevil, and he was saying, like, yeah, the writers basically looked at Old Boy and thought, like, maybe we can incorporate some of that,
Mm,
in it. So yeah,
yeah.
all good art is imitation of other good art as well. So there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, no, like it's not, like as long as you make it different enough not to be an exact copy. But other than that, like yeah, that's what I think that was very eye-opening when I worked on a project, not a comic project, but I worked on a different project, and there were writers in that like room that had so much experience, and then they pulled out this whole document of, like inspired, like things to be inspired. And I'm like, oh, apparently that's okay. I was very worried always about that in the beginning, but now I don't do it a lot. I just more like sort of take note of things, like I said, things that inspire me and like is. And, and then when I'm editing, I'm just looking at that and I was like, oh, is there something that I might have forgotten? Because I've got ADHD, I forget things a lot. Things just don't stick in here. So I write down, I make a lot of notes and then sort of look through those notes like, oh, that's interesting, or that maybe I can incorporate something like this in the story. Yeah, and that really works well so far. But yeah, I do try to still find that little bit of originality that no one has done yet before, but it's very difficult.
Absolutely. I think the real piece of originality now lies in how you mix the genres, because genres themselves have been done to death. So most of the, especially, like, I've seen this in this trend in indie comics, especially, that people love to mash up genres and then come up with something that's more unique in terms of
Hmm.
setting. Like, I interviewed this guy from Las Vegas, and his whole comic book is around fantasy and crime. And I know, like, there have been a few recent, like, movies slash things on fantasy and crime, but like his take was like completely original on the whole, like, how you built the world, and things like that. So maybe, like just how you mash up the genres together, it could be like a good way forward to, like, building something unique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done like with the City of Truth is also like it features like elves and like fantasy creatures like orcs and whatever, but it's set in a modern city. And I that was like that's also like where I kind of mashed it up, and I really would love to explore that more in maybe a bigger story that sort of like mashed up like fantasy and like the sort of urban sci-fi sort of thing. So that was really cool. Also really cool to see when I got the art, because I described it in the script what it looked like, and then I got the art. I was like, yes, that's exactly what the vibe I was going for. Just like these orcs and like elves and stuff like that, just walking around in like hoodies and whatever, and just it was just really really cool to see that come to life. And
Mm.
currently I'm with a friend, I'm working on a project where we're trying to also sort of mix certain, not necessarily always genre, but like sort of aesthetics and vibes together that usually wouldn't work, like sort of like we're doing some sort of vintage with some sort of sci-fi kind of matching it together. And I'm sure it's like been done before, but it's really interesting to sort of mesh things together that are unlikely, that are usually not supposed to go together.
Yeah.
And the same
Yeah.
with genres as well. Yeah, that's I really try and look at that sometimes, but it's also different. Like sometimes I find it different to put a genre on certain things. Like I'll write things and it's like, yeah, it's horror, but it's also kind of this, and it's also kind of, I feel
Yeah.
like it's very difficult to you always see if you ever go to like IMDb and you go like to the genres of like a film. Sometimes I have like six genres because I just can't figure out what it is, and it's kind of like that. But yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
interesting to match mix and match a few things
Oh,
like that.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. No, that's awesome. Cool. Yeah, I think what like I think my final question is what kind of characters do you love writing, and what like do you have any advice for writers who are starting off now?
I love characters. Oh man, so like I said before, I started role playing when I was 14, and I recently made a list of all the original characters I wrote in like the past 11 years. I got to 85. So like
Wow, that's amazing.
I really written most of them I don't remember because it's been years, but like it's just like it was so much. But I really enjoy writing characters that have some sort of character development in the long run, or like that sort of start at one point and a sort of change there. But also sometimes characters, I don't know. I read so many different characters. Usually I'd really like the first thing I figure out is like what are they struggling with? What is their like their flaw? What's the thing they need to solve? If that makes sense.
Yep.
But also like yeah, I on one hand I really enjoy writing like very complicated or like evil characters, and then I also really love writing like the sort of the gentle giant is like a trope that I really love, or like some sort of punk character, or just I really love like writing all kinds of characters. And I think
Yeah.
that's also like the beauty of writing, where you kind of get to step into different people's shoes all the time. And sometimes it's difficult because sometimes I write a really smart character who knows a lot about a certain topic and I don't,
Yeah.
so I have to like
Yeah.
research that. And yeah, no, and I guess as far as advice goes, is um, I feel like just write a lot and also like write things for yourself, because I feel like a lot of times we're kind of like being pushed to like publish things or like put things out there, or like even for money or whatever for work. And I feel like it's good to have a space where you can kind of retreat and kind of write just for yourself. And like I said, roleplay was really good for that because you improvise the whole time. You're writing with someone else, they send you a reply and you reply back, but you don't know in like what they're gonna say. So it gets very like you have to really think quick and kind of, and also the same goes if you like ever like play like Dungeons and Dragons or a tabletop role play and you're actually role playing as a character in person. Is really great because you have to improvise so much and you have to really come up with the spot, and it really like sort of tickles your creativity. And yeah, I think that would definitely be my advice, just to find that sort of space where you can write freely and experiment. Like the first comic that I wrote is never going to see the light of day, but it was really good to like figure out what works and what doesn't work. And other than that, if you want to break into, I mean, I always feel like I haven't really broken into comics. I'm not that, I'm not, I was like, I don't feel like, I feel like that would be arrogant to say, but like, if you want to, just, get a little bit further in comics, I think you just need to network a lot, but you also need a lot of luck. And I think I feel like I've seen people who like been working for like a decade on getting things, and then they're so good, but they just don't have the luck for some reason. And it's just, I feel like writing is just part obviously skill, part networking, and part luck. Those are the three things
Yeah.
that you need, and the only two of them you can influence. So you can only just keep writing and continuing honing your skill, and also like consume content of other people just to see what you like and what you don't like. And then networking is just like important to not go for the big names. Just like find your peers, find like people who are on your level that you can grow with. And that's honestly what is great, because I have a few people that I talk to about like comics and stuff like that. And it's just great to have people who are at my level so we can kind of support each other, but also, learn from each other and just understand what we're going through. And
Yeah.
that'd be different if you'd like constantly try and reach like the big names, if you want to call it that, because they are, and obviously they are busy as well, so they don't really have time to just connect with random people. But
Yeah.
no, I think it's important to just, yeah, to stick to your peers, and also just, yeah, like I said, find a space where you can create freely without any judgment, and where you can make errors, because it's very difficult sometimes if you if you're working on like a project and you feel like you're under pressure, like, oh, I can't make any mistakes right here because it's very important. But if you have just a thing that's just for yourself where you can do whatever, you can learn from the mistakes. Because I think I'm learned most from like looking at like old things I've written and being like, oh, that's wrong, that's not good. But yeah, I think that will be my advice.
Yeah, that's actually great advice, and thank you so much for that. Oh, actually, I lied. This is the last question I want to ask you. I read about on your profile that you're a sensitivity consultant.
Yes.
What do you do as a part of it, and how does that help in your line of work and the people you work with?
Yeah, so what it is basically, a sensitivity reader is basically someone who reads, for example, manuscripts, but also could be comics or other things, and reads them to check for problematic content. And that could be very specific topics. So, for example, I'm autistic, so I read for autism a lot because I know, also have a lot of knowledge on what the autism community is like and stuff like that. And so what I would do, so someone who, let's say, someone who's not autistic has written a book with an autistic character, like a significant character, not just a side character, just a significant character who has an important role, and they want to just make sure that portrayal is accurate and not some sort of stereotype. Then they could send it to me, and I will read it, and I will comment and give feedback on that. And I think that's really important because, for example, if we're just sticking to the autism bit for now, I grew up not having any positive representation for autism, so I spent a lot of my time, a lot of my years, like sort of wishing I wasn't autistic because I couldn't see the good in it. And
Mm,
then, and I think like it still is really bad. You always have for autism, you have the three musketeers. You've got the non-verbal white boy. Who is just very shy. You've got the awkward white boy teenager and the very smart, intelligent white man. Those are the three you've got. Those are the three you get. That's all you get. So it's very important to, I think, for if you're writing a character, and like I said, it's a character who has a significant role in the story, who is not your identity. That could be, for me, for example, if I were to write a black character, I would hire a black sensitivity reader to make sure I don't make any mistakes. Because even if you feel like you've done your research and you're doing a good job, you'll always miss things. And I see this a
yeah,
lot with when people send me stuff to read. They've done their research and yet they still make mistakes because it's simply something that you wouldn't know if you're not of that identity or if you're not of that experience. And a lot of people feel like it's censoring or something like that, and it's not. It's literally just making sure that your audience doesn't your audience feels seen and that you're portraying something accurately.
yep,
Because bad, like the whole thing, for example, with autism representation, is that people will tell me I don't look autistic because all they've seen is those three musketeers. So
yeah.
like yeah, and that's terrible. It really affects people in real life, how things are portrayed in the media. So it's very important to have your work checked if you're writing a character that is just not of your own identity. And yeah, that's why I feel like more and more people are starting to realize that now. But okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. No, yeah. So the sensitivity reading is definitely something that is more coming up, and it's definitely important to consider that. And also, like, obviously, not everyone has the budget because you do have to, you can't expect someone to read like your 100K manuscript for free. But but
Yeah.
with comics as well, like I wrote a deaf character recently, and once the comic is finished, I'm gonna send it over to someone. It's just a few pages, like the character is only in a few pages, but like it's also including ASL. So like I want to make sure that it makes sense. But yeah, that's basically what that does.
That's amazing. I think it's extremely important for and not for any other reason, just to get things right, like and I for a lot of for a very long time, if you can see, I'm brown. I mean, and, like
Hmm.
there's a lot of like stereotypes in pop culture around people
Yeah.
like me, and people of many different kinds, so
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
very
No.
yeah, for and when I see like someone like me getting represented very accurately in pop culture, I love it, so
Yeah.
just makes the story better in every
Yeah,
way.
I'm the same. Yeah, I'm the same. Whenever I see like an autistic character or like a ADHD, and if I see it represented so well, it makes me so happy because I'm really like, yeah, that's what I am like. And obviously, like for example, like, and it's the same for any sort of identity. Everyone's different, but it's very annoying when it's always the same sort of like stereotype that's being represented. Like I said, those three musketeers that I mentioned, they exist. You know, those
Yeah,
people exist. That's
yeah,
true. But they're the only one getting any spotlight at the moment, and
yeah,
it's really frustrating to see. But yeah, no, it's definitely I definitely see sort of a change now that people are just paying attention
yeah.
and figuring out like, yeah, maybe we should actually represent things properly.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you know, like I recently read like one of the anthologies. I interviewed somebody from an anthology called Fairy Tales from Mars. It was like a really
Mhm.
lovely anthology, and one of the stories was about a character who was non-binary. It was written
Mhm.
by someone who was non-binary, and the good part about the story was it was not about them being non-binary. It was about them going on an adventure. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
you need
that's
those
also
kind of, yeah, you need those kind
yeah.
of stories.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's also like it's the same with like autistic characters where just like because I'm also non-binary, so I get what you mean. But also like with autistic characters as well, like somehow autism is their whole personality. I'm like, this is just it's just a part of who they are. It's not like it's not just the whole the whole story doesn't have to revolve around that. And that you see that so much with like any kind of like marginalized identity, where it's just like it's apparently it's such a big part of the story, and that like their identity is somehow all like their like marginalized identity is all they are for some
yeah,
reason,
yeah,
and it's really annoying. And also like when I try, for example, when I wrote Forgotten Reality, that character obviously is Indian, but like it doesn't matter for the story. It's just like it's because it's only 4 pages anyway, but it doesn't.
yeah,
It's just like this character happens to be Indian, but he goes on a journey, and the identity other than that doesn't really matter for the story.
yeah,
And I feel like that's very nice to see sometimes with all kind of character where it's just like these characters exist as they are,
yeah,
going to restore like any other character does. And that's what and obviously there are obviously stories where it's important to mention their identity, where it's like especially if for example if I want to write as an autistic person want to write a story about an autistic character exploring their autism, that's like that's those stories exist too, and those stories are also necessary, but it doesn't have to be every story. It doesn't
yes,
have to be about that. Yeah.
yeah. Amazing. Well, yeah, I think we're coming to time, but it was great having you
Mhm.
here.
Yeah, it was
And
nice.
yeah, just put your links. We'll put all your social links in the description, and everyone please follow Anna everywhere on socials. Look out for their work. We're coming the upcoming book as well. Um,
Yes.
do you have any links to like? Please share any links to the stores that people can buy your work from, or any of those things. But yeah, thank you for your time, and it was awesome having you here.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you for having me. It was very fun.